Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Kicking off today's video is a story about an old man who treated his grass like sacred ground and his neighbor's property like an acceptable sacrifice. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. The Lawn King finally met a boundary he couldn't mow over. At my last residence, my next-door neighbors were an old couple. The wife was pleasant enough, quiet, soft-spoken, the type who'd wave from the porch and shuffle back inside. But the husband? An ornery old jerk with a permanent scowl and a personality made of vinegar and rust. He had one true love in life, his lawn. This man treated his patch of grass like it was Buckingham Palace. Perfect stripes, trimmed edges, not a weed in sight. He spent more time with that lawn than I suspect with his actual wife. My garage, however, was not part of his landscaping kingdom. Unfortunately, his sprinkler system thought otherwise. He had those rotating sprinkler heads that shoot water in hard, steady arcs, and he would angle them intentionally, without a doubt, so the spray drenched the entire side of my wood-sided garage. The paint on that side was peeling, the boards warped, and you could literally see the difference between the sun-faded normal age sides of the garage and the soggy, weather-beaten disaster facing his yard. It was obvious what the culprit was. I asked him politely, more times than I can count, not to let his sprinklers blast my garage. Each time he'd grunt, pretend he didn't hear me, or do that old man harumph and wander off mid-sentence. And each time, the sprinkler would magically find its way back to firing directly at my siding. He acted like the water had more right to be on my property than I did. The hilarious part? My actual property line was 4 feet past my driveway toward his house. But he'd been mowing, watering, and fussing over every blade of grass right up to the edge of my driveway for so long that he considered that section his personal royal acreage. He truly believed that because he maintained it, he owned it. He did not. And one afternoon, he learned that the hard way. I pulled into my driveway after work and spotted his sprinkler going full blast in the backyard. Not drifting, not overshooting by accident, no. Set deliberately so the spray was arcing in perfect, even sweeps across the side of my garage like it was the star attraction in some aquatic torture device. Something in me snapped. I eased off the driveway, very calmly and deliberately turned my wheel, and then pressed down on the accelerator just enough to give myself momentum. For about 25 glorious feet, I drove my car directly over the section of grass he mistakenly believed belonged to him. The ground was soft, and my tires carved a beautiful, satisfying rut straight through his precious lawn, right into the space he cared about more than basic human decency. The next day, I was sitting quietly in my living room reading a book when I heard it. "What the F? That SOB!" I stood up, walked calmly to the window, pulled back the blinds. There he was, standing in his yard, staring at the damage with a look so dramatic you'd think I had personally burned down his childhood home. His face was beet red, his veins were popping, his hands were shaking. He looked like he was about to have a cardiac event right there on the lawn. I smiled, I waved, and then I closed the blinds and went back to my book. It was perfect. The following afternoon, there was a knock at my door. It was his wife, sweet, apologetic, clearly embarrassed to have to deal with the situation. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She just asked, with that painful politeness older women have mastered, why I would do such a thing to their yard. I explained everything, calmly, that her husband had been soaking my garage for years, that I had politely asked him to stop multiple times, that he ignored me again and again, and that the section of grass I drove over was, in fact, my property, not theirs. Her eyes widened at that part. I could see the math happening behind her glasses. By the time she left, she fully understood. More importantly, she agreed very firmly that her husband would no longer run his sprinkler toward my garage. And he never did again. Amazing how fast someone can learn respect when it's their lawn on the line. He exploded, ranted, and fumed. His wife came calmly, listened, processed the facts, and corrected the situation. That contrast alone explains why the problem persisted for so long, and why it ended so cleanly once the truth was acknowledged. The resolution didn't require shouting or threats, just someone finally being forced to confront reality. And our second story. My manager fired me for attending my grandfather's funeral. A few years ago, I was working at a corporate job, the kind with endless policy documents, mandatory training modules, and managers who think the rules apply to everyone except themselves. Around that time, my grandfather passed away. This wasn't a distant relative I saw on holidays. He was one of the most important people in my life. Losing him hit me like a freight train, and on top of grieving, I needed to fly to Florida to help handle the estate and support my family. So I went to my manager and requested emergency PTO. Not a vacation, not time off to relax, actual emergency leave. He denied it almost instantly. I thought maybe a different policy would apply, so I asked to take FMLA instead. No, he said, grandparents aren't covered. I explained, gently at first and then less gently, that I would not be able to come into work for at least a couple of weeks. I had a funeral to attend, a grieving family to support, and estate-related responsibilities that couldn't wait. His response? Come in anyway or be terminated. So I was terminated. And then, because corporate cruelty loves a flourish, they offered me 2 whole weeks of severance. The catch? I had to sign an NDA, a gag order, and an indemnity clause that would prevent me from suing them, criticizing them, or basically even uttering their name in anything but a positive tone. It was a full you get nothing, but also sign away your rights package. Absolutely not. I refused. This all happened on August 1st when I updated my LinkedIn profile. I listed my employment as ending on that date. The company, however, filed my termination as July 31st. They claimed it was for benefits reasons, but we all know they just wanted to control the narrative. I moved on, got another job, had a baby, life continued. Then, 6 months later in January, I'm up early with my 6-week-old newborn, exhausted, rocking the baby while trying to stay awake. I check my phone and see a LinkedIn notification. My former manager viewed my profile. Weird. A few minutes after that, I get another notification. LinkedIn is disputing my employment dates at the company. He had actually reported the discrepancy between July 31st and August 1st. Yes, a grown man in management woke up one day 6 months later and thought, I need to correct my ex-employee's LinkedIn end date by 1 day. LinkedIn sided with him and removed the entire work experience from my profile. And since verification requires a company email address, which I no longer had, I couldn't restore the verified status even when I reposted it. That level of pettiness? That level of obsession? Oh, he earned what came next. I had his personal cell number from when I worked there. Finding his home address took about 10 minutes. I also found his personal and work email addresses. And then I unleashed a biblical plague of spam. I signed him up for every mailing list, every subscription, every free newsletter I could find. Cooking blogs, cryptocurrency alerts, cat foster networks, daily devotionals, timeshare offers. But that was just the warm-up. I went to every real estate site and moving company I could find and submitted requests for high-value sales leads. Please contact me as soon as possible. Name his, email his, phone, both work and personal, address his. Anyone in sales knows that a lead like that gets blood pumping. Within an hour, every realtor and moving company in the county was blowing up his phone. And because his role at work was client-facing, he had to answer his calls. He couldn't just mute his phone for 2 days and hide. A former coworker later told me his phones were ringing nonstop, work and personal, and he was completely overwhelmed. Did he ever figure out it was me? Possibly. Do I care? Absolutely not. If you kick someone while they're grieving, deny them basic humanity, try to silence them with legal paperwork, and then still feel the need to harass them from afar, you deserve every telemarketer that finds you. Screw that guy. And our next story. The Forest Service tried to claim a road on my land. Let me tell you about the best $800 I ever spent. My title insurance policy. A few years back, my wife and I finally achieved our dream. We bought 40 acres of pristine mountain property. It's completely surrounded by national forest. During the purchase, our title search revealed a quirk. A discontinued Forest Service road ran through the property. Keyword, discontinued. The easement had been vacated decades ago. It was legally just a scar on our land. But nobody had told the Forest Service, or the public. They'd left the old faded road sign up at the highway. For hunters and hikers, it was an invitation. For us, it was a nightmare. We'd find trucks parked in our meadow, strangers walking past our cabin, and once a guy field-dressed a deer 100 yards from our porch. The final straw was a hunter who got belligerent when I asked him to leave. "It's a public road," he yelled, pointing at the sign. I was done. We installed a sturdy, locked gate at the property line on the old road trace. A week later, a green Forest Service truck pulled up. 2 rangers got out. "Ranger, you can't gate a Forest Service road." Me: "This isn't a Forest Service road. It's a discontinued road on private property. The easement was vacated in 1972. Ranger: "We have maintenance records for this route. You need to remove the gate." Me: "Okay," I said calmly. "I need you to do something for me first. I need you to put that in writing on official letterhead, state that the United States Forest Service claims a legal right-of-way easement across my property described here." The ranger looked confused. "Why?" Me: "Because if you're right, then someone owes me a lot of money. I have title insurance. If you have a valid claim to this land that wasn't found in the title search, my insurer will have to pay me for my loss. And then," I smiled, "their lawyers will come talk to you about recovering what they paid." They're already paid for. I'd love to see that letter. The 2 rangers glanced at each other. The mood shifted from authoritative to uncertain. Me pressing on: "Alternatively, you could just come get your damn sign. It's causing trespassing problems, and I'm tired of arguing with armed strangers in my backyard." Your choice. Give me the letter or take the sign. 3 days later, they were back. No letter. They brought tools, pulled up the old signpost, and drove off with it. We haven't had a trespassing hunter argue with us since. Fast forward 5 years, we get a visit from a different government truck, this time from the Timber Management Division. They wanted to log a beetle kill stand in the National Forest adjacent to us. "Great," I said. "Knock yourselves out." "Well," the forester said, "the most efficient access is along that old road trace through your property. We'd need to bring in skidders and loaders. We'd fix the road when we're done." I almost laughed. Me: "So you want an easement for heavy industrial traffic?" Forester: "It's just temporary access for forest management." Me: "Same deal. You need to put that request in writing, a formal temporary construction easement for commercial use. Describe the equipment, the duration, the remediation. Send it to me." He looked hopeful. Me continued: "Because the second I get it, I'm forwarding it to my title insurance company. If the U.S. government is asserting a right to use my land for logging access, that's a claim against my title. They'll have to settle with me, and then again, their very hungry lawyers will contact your legal department to discuss why this undiscovered easement exists. It'll be a whole thing." The color drained from his face. The friendly neighbor act vanished. Forester: "We'll look at other access points." Me: "I think that's a great idea." They never logged that section. I see them using a much longer, harder route on the other side of the ridge. The moral of the story isn't just get off my lawn. It's always get title insurance. It's not just protection against a clerical error from 100 years ago. It's a nuclear deterrent. It's a prepaid legal team that makes bureaucrats and bullies suddenly remember that other routes exist. Your key move? Put it in writing on official letterhead was genius. It transformed casual bureaucratic assertion into a formal, documentable claim. Most agencies rely on verbal pressure because it's low risk. The moment you demand a paper trail, you raise the stakes beyond their comfort level. And our last story. My grandfather wanted to build 6 houses. The neighbors fought him, so he built a 150-sow pig farm instead. This story isn't mine, it's my grandfather's, but in our family, it's told like a legend, a parable about unintended consequences and the nuclear option of rural zoning. 20 years ago, Granddad owned a beautiful 60-acre parcel of hayfield bordered on 3 sides by a handful of upscale hobby farms and new-build homes. It was the last big open space in the area. When he retired, he decided to sell. His plan was simple, and he thought reasonable. Get the land rezoned, divide it into 6 10-acre lots, and sell them to people who wanted a little more space. He wasn't building a strip mall, he was offering more of what they already had. The neighbors lost their minds. They packed the township zoning board meeting. They formed a concerned citizens group. Their argument? Increased traffic would endanger the rural character and create a safety hazard for children and horses. Never mind that the proposed lots were larger than most of theirs. It was about preserving their view, their quiet. For months they fought him. They hired a lawyer. They dragged the process out. Granddad, a man of infinite patience but zero tolerance for hypocrisy, finally had enough. At the final decisive board meeting, after yet another neighbor gave a tearful speech about losing the pastoral landscape, the chairman called for a vote. The rezoning was denied. Granddad stood up. He was a quiet man, so when he spoke, people listened. "I understand the board's decision," he said, his voice calm. "You've determined that the highest and best use of this land is to preserve its agricultural character. I appreciate that guidance. I'll proceed accordingly." The neighbors smiled. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what they'd just won. See, while a residential subdivision needed permission, an agricultural operation on existing farmland did not. There were no rules against scaling it up, no permits needed for the smells and sounds of honest farm work. The very next week, Granddad sold all his haying equipment, he took out a loan, and invested in the infrastructure for a modern, intensive pig farm. Within a month, the first transport trucks arrived, not with new neighbors, but with 150 breeding sows. Then came the grower pens, the feed silos, and the lagoon for, well, the natural byproducts of a pig farm. The smell descended first, a thick, organic, unmistakable scent that traveled on the breeze. The sound came next, the constant cacophonous chorus of hundreds of pigs. The flies arrived that summer in biblical proportions. The pastoral landscape was now an industrial-scale agricultural operation. Their open space victory now featured a symphony of oinks and an aroma that clung to your clothes. The neighbors panicked. Their property values didn't just dip, they nosedived. Who wants to buy a $500,000 country estate next to a pig farm? They begged the township to do something. The township shrugged. It was a permitted use. Then they came crawling back to Granddad, offering to drop all opposition if he'd just go back to his house plan. He met them on his porch, the distant sound of pigs providing the soundtrack. "You fought for the land to remain agricultural," he reminded them, sipping his iced tea. "I'm honoring the board's decision and the will of the community. I'm a farmer. This is my crop." He never built those houses. He ran that pig farm profitably for 10 years. By the time he sold the land to another farmer, the surrounding properties had permanently shed their pretentious estate premiums. The moral of the story, as he told it, in a fight, don't just back someone into a corner. Make sure you like what's in the corner with them. My corner had pigs. And that's how a neighborhood's fight against a few families gave them a few hundred pigs instead. Be careful what you wish for. The neighbors framed their objections as concern for safety and rural character. But what they were really defending was an aesthetic bubble that depended on someone else's restraint. Once that restraint was gone, they discovered that agricultural zoning protects function, not comfort. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.